to the volunteer update. Today we have Eugene Gavin and Kenneth Gavin from the Gavin family whose ancestors came to the island in 1917. We're honored to have them here. Eugene is the 5th son and Kenneth is the 4th son of 20 children of the Edmund and Elnola Gavin family. We're honored to have them here. Please welcome Eugene and Kenneth Gavin.
I'm Eugene Gavin, and I'm the 5th born child of Edmund and Elnora Gavin. And I was born on Captiva Island. If you're familiar with Captiva, that would be where the Dickey Lane has its name now. But at that time, it didn't have a name, so we were just in the farm area, and that's where I was supposed to have been born. But at that time, I didn't know that was told.
And I'm Kenneth Gavin, that's Kenneth Morris Gavin. I'm the 4th child. Actually, I'm the oldest surviving son now. Our oldest brother and our oldest sister have passed away. I was raised on Sanibel, went to school on Sanibel, but was born in Fort Myers, Florida. We enjoyed life on Sanibel as children. My parents were very loving and caring. And one thing about my mother is that everyone seemed to love her. And she just loved children. And I can remember coming back home for vacation from Michigan, and would go to Bailey's store with my mother. And it just seems like all the kids in the store were just, no matter what color, they were just, somehow they were drawn to her. And that's the way it was around the home with my mom and dad. They really loved children. And I can remember a joke that was told, I don't know if it's true or not, but when my mother went to the hospital to have her 20th child, I'm told that the nurse told her that, says, well, Elnora, we'll see you next year. And she said, no, says, Edmund and I finally found out what was causing them.
My grandparents, maternal grandparents, came to Sanibel in 1917, some say 1912, and I have always known the date to be 1917. And my grandfather, they came to do farming, and my grandmother did housekeeping. And I don't remember my grandfather doing any farming, but I always remember my grandmother doing housekeeping. And both grandparents, Pearl Alice Walker, my mom's parent, I remember her doing housekeeping on Captiva. Hannah did housekeeping on Sanibel, and they never crossed the boundaries. And my mom, or either my father, seemed to have been always the one to take Pearl Alice to Captiva to her jobs. And if she didn't pick Pearl Alice up on time, Pearl would be always almost halfway to her house because she didn't wait around for the moment. And then my mom would be smiling and she'd say, nothing is funny. I'm late for work. And I can remember some of those words. And occasionally, after I grew up, at least about 7, I would go at my weekends off from school, go to Captiva, and I'd work with Harry Walker, and nobody worked with Pearl, so occasionally she would call me in to do something if it wasn't anything, to try to put the dishes up. And I guess she wanted to get her time in with me, and Harry got his time in. And when Mom didn't get up there to pick us up, we would start walking back home. And from Captiva, I went to Sandcap Road, if you're familiar with where the Gavin site is. And Pearl Alice would have to go all the way down to Tarpon Bay, go all the way down Tarpon Bay Road across from the park. You're familiar with the park where people park and they go to the beach and have their fun. And that's how far she had to walk if Dad didn't get home early enough to see that she and Harry got home. So that was part of my enjoyment with the grandparents. But they were always there for us. And if my mom didn't get to see Pearl Alice and Harry, they got down to see us. But they were all loving and close-knit family.
I can remember as a young child, we started work at a very early age, little kids, maybe 7 or 8. And other kids that I've come in contact with talk about working farms. Well, we worked the beaches. My daddy would wake us up early in the morning, probably about 4:30, 5 o'clock, take us to the beach, and we'd pick up shells, probably for a couple hours. Then he'd bring us back home, and we'd get ready and then walk to school. After school, we'd go back to the beach and pick up shells, and we had buckets that we would pick them up in, and when the buckets got filled, we would take them up into the high tide level, and then Dad would come later on, and he'd see where we had left them. He'd pick them up until he caught up with us. And then we'd bring all the shells back. He had big bins that we'd put those shells in, and then we would sort those shells, and then on a weekend, someone from Fort Myers Shell Factory would come over, purchase the shells. And the one thing we used to enter the contest, the best seashell exhibit. And we would always come in either second or third place. We always thought that maybe there was a little racism that we didn't get first place, but we always thought that our exhibits were really the best because we were out on the beach all the time, and we found a lot of beautiful shells, Janonias, seahorses, and things like that. But we worked the beaches, and then we walked to school. And after school, like I said, we'd go to work after school. We didn't have the luxury of electricity, and television, and things like that. We had kerosene lamps, and you'd have to clean the shades and do your homework. One thing about my mother is that she was very interested in us getting a good education. If you brought a C home, a C grade home, you were in trouble. I remember my sister, I think she's next to Eugene, Charlotta. She used to get all A's, and one marking period she got a B plus. And you would think that she was on her way to hell. She hollered and cried and screamed. We thought something was really wrong, and she said, "I got a B plus. I'm supposed to get an A." But that's the way my mother was serious about education. And of course, I'm proud of the fact that I work for J.P. Carter Company, and there's very little history on Sanibel J.P. Carter Company, but that was how people got everything over here. J.P. Carter Company, if you wanted a grocery list, you call J.P. Carter Company, they pick up the groceries and we deliver it. Back then, there was probably 75 families on Sanibel, maybe 35 on Captiva. And I knew everybody on Sanibel and Captiva. And then I went away to school and went into the Air Force and came back home, and the bridge had been built, and Sanibel was no longer Sanibel. But we enjoyed Sanibel, except for the mosquitoes. I noticed in Michigan, they have mosquitoes too, but you kind of slap one here every now and then. On Sanibel, you had to rub them, but then they began to spray on Sanibel, and it was much better. But I was the first of the Gavin children to get a college education. My oldest brother went to FAMU for a year, and then he dropped out because of money, and then he went into the Air Force. But I was the first one to get a bachelor's degree and then a degree, a Juris Doctor degree in law. But it's all because of my mom, my dad stressing education and made sure that we all had an opportunity to get a good education. Most of the Gavin children, I think only have one. My oldest sister is the only child that did not get a diploma. The rest of us, most of us have some college education. Out of the 20 kids, most of them have some college education.
At the time that we can reach back and remember, we lived off of Island End Road, and this part of Island End Road you won't be familiar with because it doesn't exist today. Part of it, where we live up on the west side of Island End Road existing today, we would go back almost a mile. If you're familiar with the Gable House, we would line up just about with the Gable House on north and south. And when we would go to the beach in the morning before we would go to school, we would go right by the Gable House and go to the beach, and we'll walk all the way down to a little past East Rocks, which is where most of your fine shells, your Janone, Scotch bonnets and things would wash up from the Gulf, and that's where we would pick up our better shells. And as Reverend, I call him Reverend because that's what he is, and I used to call him Reverend Gavin, attorney at law, because he majored in both of those. So I call him Attorney Gavin, sometime Reverend Gavin, and very seldom Ken Gavin. But that's where we would go in the morning before school and after school. And the school we went to was Lilly and Company, where it is today. And when I first can remember, reach back, it had to have 7 children. And when Mom and Dad went to the school board, Dad said that, well, I can supply with 7. And at that time, he did have enough children to get the school open the next day. But of course, they didn't move that fast. They didn't move fast like him, but I think he wanted to get them out of the house, from the beach, and in the classroom. And of course, it wasn't many days after that, he got that. And after it didn't go any further than 4th grade, I can remember the teacher's name was Lossie Mae Pearson, and she was a school teacher, and she taught just about everything. She taught the dramatics, she taught math, she taught English, she taught chemistry. Everything that she had learned, it was applied to us in the one-room schoolhouse. And one day, I had to get a little skinning by her, and we would always have lunch at 12. And when she went to lunch, someone had given her a nice plant and put it on her desk. And when she went, I was able to find some potash, lye. I don't know if you're familiar with some of those things that we used to use during those days. And I put it in her glass. And the water turned black. Not knowing this, because I didn't get far enough in chemistry, that this would change the color of the water. My father found out, and he didn't wait till I got home. We had a little stage in the front of the classroom, and that's where I took my skinning, right in front of the class, in front of all the children. And Lossie Pearson and I got along very well, after that. And after the 4th grade, because that was far the class went, then we had to go to Fort Myers. And not...
He says 4th. I remember it as 5th.
Well, you remember 4th, 5th, and 7th because you skipped 2 classes because you were so smart.
No, I was smart. It was that in order for the school to remain open, they had to have so many kids in each grade. And so I did 2 grades in 1 year in order to keep the school open. And I think it was 4th and 5th grade that I did. And then when we moved to Fort Myers, I started in 6th grade. Yeah.
See how smart he is? But anyway, I remember when we moved to Fort Myers, my grandmother, Hannah, Isaiah's wife, lived in my 4th grade class. She lived right across the street, Indian Street, and I could look out the room and see out the window and see her if she was out in the yard planting flowers or some kind of fruit or veggies. I could see her, and it seemed like I spent all this time looking, and Miss George would always ask me, "Why are you always looking at the window?" And I say, "I'm ashamed of the class." I didn't want to tell her my grandmother was over there because that would blow it. She might put me in a different area in the classroom where I couldn't see her. And Reverend has spoke about J.P. Carter Trucking Company. Well, I work for J.P. Carter Trucking Company also. And he got me the job. And I think my first Social Security card was gotten at that time. And I just lost it 4 years ago, but it was pretty well worn out. But anyway, I started driving when I was in 10th, 11th grade, I can't remember, 11th grade. And I had a restricted license. And my instructor was Dr. Gilmore. He was the driving instructor. And they would bring the big dump truck with all of the lumber and everything on it, parking under this big tree. And I'd have to come out of my classroom, look around, make sure everything was clear, get in the truck, and drive it all the way to Sanibel with a restricted license. Well, this tree sits right in front of the industrial arts class where the driver's education instructor was also. And I'd look around because I know I was not supposed to be driving, but I'd get in the truck, take off down Blunt Street, I believe it was, come all the way to Sanibel, and I got all this lumber on the truck. But I was a skilled driver. And when Dr. Gilmore found out I was the one driving J.P. Carter Trucking Company with lumber on it with a restricted license, he told me, "I'm gonna see that your license get revoked." And I told Paul Stalling about it. Paul Stalling got back to him and said, "You better not bother him with them license. He helps his parents earn money to see that the family is taken care of." Didn't hear nothing about the license being restricted anymore. I drove, and then I drove a year or 2 years after he had left and went to school. Then I got tired of trucking. I said, "I'm gonna join the Air Force. I'm not gonna go to college." So I went to the Air Force, I went to Air Force school when I was in the Air Force, took up skills in the military, took up classes under the University of Maryland. I also took up in Tampa, Florida, where I was, and that's how I got most of my education. But after I stayed in for 8 years and got out and went to Colorado, I said, I don't think I really need to be bothered with college. I'm pretty smart. I knew industrial arts, I knew how to build. I learned all this stuff from my dad, so I utilized that, and I only took up 2 more years of college after 8 years in the military, and I'm still doing general maintenance, plumbing, electrical, drywall, painting, and all of these things. So I figured I don't really need an education that high like my big brother. I'll survive well with what I have, and I've been doing well. My experiences with it, other than that poison the teachers plant, was that we all got along well in the classroom and was very obedient. I can remember that. It just seemed like it was quiet as a church mouse when we were in there. When the teacher gave us uh, our assignment, you didn't run around and make noise in the class. You took care of business, because our father would always punish us if we didn't behave ourselves and had disrespected adults. And I remembered us walking from Island End Road to school, and we'd have to fight the mosquitoes, and the white children would have their bus ride. They'd ride by us, and sometimes we'd hide in the woods because we were a little bit embarrassed with them riding the bus and we were walking to school. But as far as going to school over here on Sanibel, I don't really regret any of it. We had fun. And sometimes when you don't have experience about certain things, you don't have to worry about it, because if you don't know, you don't worry about it. And I didn't really worry or find out about segregation that much until I went in the military. And that was when I left Fort Myers and went to Miami to the induction center. The white young men went to the hotel, and we went to a different hotel that was segregation. And I remember the training instructor being familiar with segregation. He said, you won't have to worry about that anymore. And I was appointed as the team instructor, squadron instructor. And I was nervous about it because I hadn't been used to telling anybody but my brothers and sisters what to do. Now, here I am in the military, and some of these guys bigger than I am, and I hadn't really seen that many people that I had to tell what to do in my life. So I was a little bit nervous, and he pulled me in there and said, you don't have to worry about anything. You'll grow, you'll develop, and you'll find out that you're gonna be a leader. And it was. As I was in the military, it seemed like I progressed well because I used my father's instructions, did what I was supposed to do. And I grew, and when I got out of service after 8 years, I was a tech sergeant, E5.
There are some things that I remember, but at the time, probably did not perceive it as detrimental, or didn't necessarily see it as I would look at it today and analyze situations. But the one thing that I do remember is that our books came from the white school. We never got any new books. We got the books that they had already had. And I do remember the incident wherein the black school had a one-seater outhouse. The white school had a two-seater outhouse, so two kids could go to the bathroom at the same time. And then when they had an indoor toilet for the white school, they moved the two-seater outhouse to the black school. So I remember those kind of things, but at the time, we were just glad to have a two-seater outhouse so that you wouldn't have to wait and go on yourself or go further out in the woods. But as you look back on those kind of situations, you realize that things were, you knew they were different, but at the time there wasn't a sort of a negative reaction to it. The one thing I remember is Paul and Vanetta Stalin, the owners of J.P. Carter Company. Even though you couldn't go to the restaurants here on Sanibel, they had a window out back. You could go to the back of the restaurant and order what you wanted, but you couldn't go inside. And Paul and Vanetta Stalin kind of took me under their wings, and they'd invite me over to their home a lot of times for dinner. When they owned Gulf View Inn, the motel up on Captiva, I could walk in there and have a meal with them or by myself. When they owned South Seas Plantation, it was the same thing. But the rest of the restaurants and businesses on Sanibel, I didn't have that luxury. And they were very close. They were like family to me. When I went over to school, I usually got a letter from them once a week with a $10 check in it. So they were very, very caring and very concerned too about the education of the Gavin children. And it's highly unusual that there's nothing on Sanibel that reminds us of that history of J.P. Carter Company. Because everything, J.P. Carter Company hauled everything over here. If a house was built, J.P. Carter Company hauled everything that went into building that house, the furniture that went into that home, J.P. Carter hauled it over here. And I guess about 2 years before the bridge was built, that company was sold. But I distinctly remember the J.P. Carter Company, and it's kind of frustrating not to see some history on Sanibel regarding the J.P. Carter Company, because they made a significant contribution to this island. Bailey's store, everything that was in that store at that time, J.P. Carter Company, milk, beer, wine, restaurants, whatever that restaurant sold, J.P. Carter hauled it. That's a sort of a lost history on this island.
I'll speak a little bit about J.P. Carter Trucking Company too, but one thing I wanted to touch base with is kind of interesting to me, and it came to grips every now and then when you're sitting in front of orders telling the story, something else will come and get out of sequence. But my mom, Reverend, and I used to work together on J.P. Carter Trucking Company also. And when we come home, we would always have some fig Newtons. And Mother, we had it so much. I mean, we love fig Newtons. He'd call them fig and call me Newton. But some things that with J.P. Carter Company, and one place that I could remember, and you may remember when Alan over there, we were talking about moving the green and white house that was on Sandcap Road. Okay, anyway, I can't remember where it went underneath the road with the new water. You remember that? Okay, anyway, that's where Paul and Finetta house was built. And I can remember that house because that was the first delivery on the J.P. Carter truck that I delivered all of the lumber for that house to be built. And then when the new owner bought that house, he called me down and asked me, because I had given him the history of the house. And my son Irvin even lived in that house for 3 years, I think. And he called me and told me that they were going to tear it down and he was going to build a new house. And I needed to come down and take anything out of it that I wanted. And I said, I'd like to slap a deed on this house and make it mine because I built it. But that was funny to me. But this city couldn't move it because it was of the age and something. It may have been too big to get on the road because the way it was built, it was kind of, I won't call it ugly, but ugly. Not quite as bad as ugly. But I was glad that they didn't accept that as a village, because I didn't like the style of the house. But anyway, they tore it down and built up a new house right next to the river, to the water, the bay side that comes underneath the Sandcap Road. When we get together, we go over a lot of things, and that happened, the history of Oscar, Edmund, Buddy, and Luke, and also Sally. We get to talk about all of the family, Pearl Alice Walker and Harry Walker. But Oscar Gavin, I remembered him as being very kind and loving, and he really reminds me of the entire family, because you wouldn't hear him curse, use profanity, or not even speak loud. He spoke soft, but he carried a big stick. It seemed like his words would be soft, but he was powerful when he said something. And as remembering him, he did landscaping. He started the first rubbish removal on Sanibel. And I think he was here on Sanibel working probably 70 years before he retired and moved to Fort Myers, he and Mattie Gavin.
He was the oldest.
He was the oldest
brother.
son.
And
He was the oldest son of
oldest.
Hannah and Oscar, Isaiah Gavin.
He was one of the Gavins. Didn't drink.
Didn't drink, didn't smoke.
I don't think he smoked. Just a kind gentleman. In fact, he told me, he says, "You're the only one I will let drive my car. I don't trust nobody else with my car." He says, "If you say you're going somewhere, you're gonna go, and you're gonna come back, and my car gonna be in one piece." But Oscar was very nice to us. He was that uncle that you always wanted to approach and be with. Before he left, he'd give you a dime or a quarter or whatever, so you could go to the store and get yourself a candy bar.
But it was never enough to get a bag of Fig Newtons.
Yeah, he was a very kind gentleman, very kind uncle.
I think the cable house was up near the east end of the island. And it was, I never studied that enough really to remember everything about it, but that's where the first message was sent, that the battleship Maine was sunk, and that's started some controversy of wars and stuff. But I have the history of it if we don't have it here in the museum. And at this time, I can say if you need some history that you want to bring forth, that you can't lay hands on your mic and contact me, and we'll see if we can't put it together. Because Velma and I have quite a bit of history. We've been trying to research and put things together and keep it, so that the family would have it, and also Sanibel. And speak of Island Inn Hotel, we haven't said anything about it, but Island Inn Hotel was one of the boarding houses that my grandfather and father was housed in when they were growing up. And Shalata Matthews, my sister Shalata, was named after Shalata Matthews. And the cottage is here, and Shalata come and look at it every time she come. I see if it's still here.
Is that the one that came from the lighthouse?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And we have pictures of the cable house, and we also have the history of it. I think we have something over at the caretaker cottage. Dad got it moved over to the Gavin site and got it set up, and he built the second floor on it. The second floor was for the girls, the bottom floor was for the boys, and he added a master, Mrs. bedroom on one side, and area for all newborns. If we get transferred to a bigger place, and then the next new one get the baby's room, until he built another place back there. But that cable house, I think, served us for maybe about 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. But anyway,
I don't know.
That was about the cable house, but I have the history of it where it was written up at home.
That was my father's philosophy.
Yeah.
He told us, if you ever decide to take on a job, once you negotiate the money and get that out of the way, forget about that. Just do the best you can. No matter what you do the best you can. And, surprisingly, my wife and I have a sort of a situation where whoever gets up last makes the bed. And a lot of times when I make it, my dad tells me, You can do a better job than that. I still hear his voice when it comes to jobs that I haven't really put my heart into. He reminds me, do the best you can. Do the best you can. I can remember when we moved to Fort Myers, I used to walk from where we lived to near the Edison Winter Home to take care of someone's yard. And on the way there, white kids would call me nigger. And so I told the person I was working with that I either have to quit my job or you're gonna have to pick me up, but I'm not gonna tolerate that. And so he started picking me up and taking me home. And then when I moved to Michigan at Ferris State University, I couldn't come home for every holiday. So I stayed on campus and worked in the dorms, and I'd be walking, between dorms and stuff, and kids would drive by and roll the window down and say, "Hey, nigga." And then when it came to getting a haircut, Big Rapids, Michigan, there's only 10 black families on Ferris State College and 2 married couples. And so I went downtown to get my haircut, and I sat there in the barber shop, and folk came in and cut their hair. I sat there maybe an hour waiting to be waited on. And finally a guy came on and said, "I don't know what you're waiting on. We don't cut niggas' hair here." And so I told Paul Steelan about it, and I wish I hadn't. Because he started cussing and says, "Take me down there and show me, and I'll get that person straight." I said, "Oh, Paul, don't worry about it." I says, I went on down the street a little further, and a guy in the barber shop came over and very nicely told me, he says, "You're the first black customer I've ever had. I don't know how, but if you tell me how you want it cut, I'll do my best. And you can come here anytime you want to." But the North, the South, there's still, those issues. Even today, there's inequality, racial issues, and even in the service, even though in the Philippines and Da Nang, there's a certain section of town that blacks went to, and a certain section that whites went to. In Biloxi, Mississippi, the same thing. You didn't mingle with white troops. You go to your section of town. So there's racism, and it's still today. You just have to remember that there's only one God, and God says treat everybody the way you want to be treated. And that's the lesson that my mother taught. She just crazy about everybody. And I can remember Henry Rhodes and my dad. Henry Rhodes and his kids lived a little ways down the street on Sandcap Road from where we lived. And their kids would come down, we'd play together. And I remember I got a whipping by my dad, because Henry Rhodes' kids would call him Edmund. And I would call Henry Rhodes Henry. And my dad said, "No, son, it's Mr. Rhodes." And I said, "Well, Dad, they call you Edmund. His kids call you Edmund. Why do I have to call him Mr. Rhodes?" He said, "Because I said so." And the next time we were together, I called him Henry because his kids called him Edmund. And after they left, my dad chastised me pretty good. And so from then on, when he did come, I wouldn't call him anything. I wasn't gonna call him Mr. and I certainly wasn't gonna call him Henry. But those were the times, and you made adjustments to the times, and there's a lot of inequality in society today, and I say it's going to get worse before it gets better today. There's some things that's going on around this in this nation today, because of people's attitudes, and it's all about the way you were taught. Okay, we all are born into this world with a clean slate, nothing on it. And our parents, our relatives, our families, our friends put stuff on there. And that becomes part of our personality. Fortunately, my mother and father and brothers and sisters, uncles and aunts, and most of the white people on Sanibel that we knew just showed a lot of love. And so that's what's on my slate. And so that helps me to get through no matter what I'm faced with.
I remember up on Sanibel, and these are probably the only two incidents that kind of bothered me, and it was Jack Cole Restaurant. Have you heard of Jack Cole Restaurant? Well, Reverend worked for Jack Cole, mowed the big lawn, did a lot of the maintenance work there. But when we got ready for service, it was a side window on the side. We'd have to go there to be served. When he's working for J.P. Carter Company, delivered everything that Jack Cole needed: ice cream, liquor, beer, part of the building material when his building needed to be remodeled by, not Paul Steele, but by the builders. Brought that. Still, you go to the side window, rain or shine, you couldn't go inside. When I moved back to Florida, I had to stay in Fort Myers first because I couldn't find a suitable place to move in. So my wife and I tried to get a place in the trailer park. And at that time, there was documents saying Puerto Ricans and Negroes could not move here. And I had a difficult time buying a property in there. And
What year is that?
that was in when did I move back here from Michigan?
I don't know, I told you not to leave.
I still have the paperwork there, but I couldn't buy a place there. And I talked to Oscar, my brother, and he says, I can't get involved in that. And then I pulled out all of my real estate papers, because I went to real estate school when I was in Benton Harbor, Michigan with my brother. And right through some of that study was saying about buying and selling real estate. And I pulled that out. It was not Dick Minch, it was his father that was living out there. He said, you go back and you talk to Dick, or you talk to Jerry. We'll get that taken care of. And the people that I was buying from was in Hawaii. They came down, and that's how we got to buy our place. They had to negotiate on the closed doors for us to buy that property. Now, I didn't ever tell you that because I didn't want you coming down here. But seriously, but as quiet as it's kept, that's what happened, trying to buy property. And and what makes you so mad, I'd spent 8 years in the military, fought in Vietnam. He was in Vietnam at the same time I was. The federal government says a parent can reject 2 children being in a combat zone at the same time. That was rejected. We still had to go. He had to go to Da Nang. I was in Benoit. And you come back here and you can't not buy a decent place to live. I wanted to come back home. And I also recall when I was in the military, I think I talked to you about that the other day. I was stationed in Warner Robins, and I think I was airman second class, airman first class at that time, and I was the ranking supervisor in the car. Kennedy had said he wanted a joint force immediately. That was a military force. He wanted the Air Force, Army, Navy, and Marines, a joint force that he could call immediately to move into a zone. They sent me and my troops to Warner Robins. I was the driver. We stopped at a restaurant in uniform, and we went in, and they told us, we can serve you, but we can't serve him. So I said, well, none of us gonna be served here. So we drove all the way from Valdosta, Georgia, all the way to Tampa, Florida, without eating. The next day I went to the commanding officer and told him, reported it to him. He immediately sent a flash message back to Warner Robins. That commander contacted that restaurant, put it off limits to all military personnel. Now they take action when you get it reported. And that was the kind of thing was going on after I got in the military. You know, the oldest was always kind of in charge. It wasn't whether you were the smartest or not. The oldest. It's kind of like longevity.
I had my diaper changing days. The one thing that I do remember is that I guess Mom's memory wasn't as good as I thought it should have been. She would have given assignments. Okay, you wash dishes today. Tomorrow's your turn. Next day your turn. You got Friday. You got Saturday. And sometimes she'd get mixed up, you know. And she says, "Ken, it's your turn to what?" I said, "No, Mom. No, it's Buster's. No, it's your turn." And a lot of times we had to just because the brother wasn't going to admit that. Then on the way to school, we'd fight. And my daddy had a rule. He says, there's 3 things you're gonna get a whipping for: lying, cheating, and fighting. And back then, you never asked your parents why this rule, why that rule. I was about 42 years old. And I came home and I got up enough nerve to ask my dad. I said, "Look, Dad," I said, "I understand lying. That affects you, your character, your reputation. I understand stealing. That affects you. You brought us up not to take stuff that didn't belong to us. But if I'm defending myself against my brother or my sister, I don't understand that." And he says, "Well, son," he says, "it's like this." He says, "If other people see you beating up on one another, they'll think it's okay for them to beat up on you. And I don't want to have to go to prison for killing someone for messing with my kids." That makes sense. So we'd fight on the way to school, but we wouldn't tell. You couldn't tell. Even if you got beaten up. And Gene was younger than me and Buster was older, so I was like in the middle. And so if Gene had order against me, Buster would hold me and let him beat me. Now, I couldn't go home and tell because then we all would get a whipping for fighting. I don't know if you remember that or not.
That was not fighting, that was just discipline. My best memories really was, I would always try to leave the house with my dad if I had the opportunity and wasn't going to school or something. I don't care if he was going to work, going to shop or what, because then I wouldn't have to wash dishes. That way I would become a winner on my father's side, because he was really a whipping boss. And I would get better respect from my grandparents, my uncles, and aunts. And that's why I'm a winner today, because I followed the grown folks. So I learned how they did things. And I think that's why I'm a plumber. I'm a little bit a lawyer because I was in his office for a while, across from his office when I was working the real estate. So he
managed. I had several properties, and he managed them. And
he got to like me real well.
Yeah.
And I visits a lot.
Growing up, I think just the fact that we were creative. We didn't have baseballs and softballs and bats, but we'd take a rag and roll it up and tie it together, take an old broomstick and use it as a bat, and we didn't have a lot. Christmas we might get, I think at Christmas we didn't get a lot of toys, we got clothes. And you try to hide your clothes and make sure, your brothers didn't wear your clothes, but we would make things for Christmas. We used to build what we call a trolley car. My dad was a painter, so he would have all these paint cans, and we'd take clothes hangers, we'd fill a can with sand and take a clothes hanger and run it through, and then tie it to a rope and we'd pull it. And that was a trolley car. And then we learned how to have double-decker, two-wheeler, 4. And we'd race around the house with those things on Christmas Day.
Yeah, and a bicycle wheel.
Bicycle wheel, yeah.
Take a clothes hanger, fold it up, and run behind the bicycle wheel.
And we used to do crazy things. We'd get a box and a little pig and tie a long string to it and put a little food underneath it and catch birds and little silly things like that. Mom wouldn't let us do that, but if they went to town together, we'd
fix things up.
We'd do silly things. And then they'd give us a sign. They were going to Fort Myers to go shopping or whatever. They'd give us assignments, mop the floor, rake the yard, clean the yard while we're gone. And we'd get to playing, and then we'd hear Dad coming because the truck needed a muffler, a car. We knew it, and then we'd run and start doing what we were told to do. And as long as we were working on it, we kind of avoided the whipping.
But he would let you know you should have been through.
Yeah, but if we hadn't started, we were in big trouble. Discipline. And believe it or not, that was one of the things that helped me in life is good home discipline. Doing what you're told to do when you're told to do it. It helped me with my homework in school because you get all these assignments in school and you're not really committed to doing all of this for the next day, but being with self-discipline. And so when I went into the military, I was aware of the fact that you needed to have self-discipline, because if they told you to do something in the military and you didn't do it, there was an Article 15 or some kind of serious punishment, or the whole flight would suffer if you didn't do what you were told to do. And so that's one good lesson that I learned from home. And even though we tried to get out of our turns, we pretty much so got along real well as kids. Sometimes we would, be mischievous and eat someone's lunch.
Somebody's
at the
cookies.
school. Mom would fix lunch for us to take to school, lunch bags, and so there was a place at the school that you take the lunch bag and you leave it there until teacher let you out for lunch. Sometimes you you on your way to the toilet and you stop in there and you grab someone's sandwich and you weren't really going to the toilet, but you
Need a reason to get out of there.
little mischievous things like that. But it was fun. It was fun, you know. The other thing is that, we weren't afraid of anything on Sanibel. Rattlesnakes, alligators. We weren't afraid. It's just, once I became wise,
Now you're afraid.
now I'm afraid of alligators. But, we'd walk through the water where the alligators were. You couldn't pay me enough now to go there.
Did you have run-ins with alligators?
Huh?
Did you have run-ins with alligators
No.
when you were growing up?
No. Mm-mm. I just learned about alligators, how vicious they can be as an adult, and so I respect them. But we'd see alligators, and we'd pick up a rock on the road, throw it, hit it on the head, and it'd duck in the pond, not knowing that alligator could come out and could chase us. And actually, for a short distance, an alligator can outrun a horse for a short distance. And not even for a short distance can I outrun a horse. But once I learned, how dangerous that is, I have a lot of respect. And I remember Mom was clearing a place for a garden, and we were all home, and she had a palmetto fan that she had lit and was burning, and she saw this rattlesnake, and she told all of us to go in the house. And we all ran in the house and stayed in the house until Dad came home. And when Dad came home, she told him about it, and he got his gun and a pitchfork and came back with the rattlesnake. And I said, boy, what a dad. Not me.
But the next time she threw the fire on the rattlesnake, whole area burning up.
But yeah.
But we didn't see the snake no more. Maybe that was the one that came back, huh?
Maybe I was one of his kids.
Thank you for joining us for the volunteer update. Be sure to check our website for other volunteer updates.